Hello everyone, welcome to Analog IAS current affair analysis for 5th August 2020, and these are the articles we'll be dealing today. The first article for the day is taken from The Hindu and it is titled Lessons from Mediating Ayodhya. Now before getting into the specifics of this, let us understand mediation as a mechanism for alternative dispute resolution. We know that our judiciary is burdened with a lot of pending cases, as many as 3.5 to 4 crore cases are lying pending in different courts across the country. So it is indispensable for the courts to settle such petty issues which can be solved if there is mediation. In order to facilitate this, in our Civil Procedure Code, Section 89 talks about mediation, or in a broader context, it talks about alternative dispute resolution. So, one of the method for this alternative dispute resolution is mediation. So, what exactly is this mediation? It is a procedure which tries to resolve a dispute between two parties, and there will be minimum intervention of the court, and there will be a committee to communicate between the two parties and ensure that they arrive at a common platform where they can solve their issues. So this is the concept of mediation. Now, in order to solve a historical dispute like Ayodhya Ram Mandir issue, there was a committee which was appointed by Supreme Court, and the writer of this article is a member of that committee. So in this particular article, he tries to explain how mediation has worked in his experience. So when this particular committee member was interviewing a lot of people, an overwhelming majority of the people favored a middle ground that did not hurt the sentiments of Muslims, and at the same time it did not hurt the sentiments of Hindus who feel very strongly about this particular place. To a lot of Hindus, this Ayodhya issue is not just any other conflict between two religions. They are very emotionally attached to this place. So it is very important for Hindus to have a claim in this region. And at the same time, Muslims have also had a historical connection with this place because this is one of the oldest mosques in the country. In this context, how do you settle the score between the two warring parties? This is the art of mediation. Now, in 1980s, there was a dialogue between the religious leaders of both Hinduism as well as Muslims. So, to represent these particular communities, the Hindus have opted for Shankaracharyas as representatives of their religion, and the All India Muslim Personal Law Board head was chosen as the representative for Muslims. So they were under severe pressure to arrive at a solution. So if this issue was to be solved, it should be solved amicably only. But having said that, in 1990s, the event of Babri Masjid demolition took a different turn, and this issue became an emotional one. So ever since this issue was made a communal one, there had been tensions, and it was taking a political turn eventually. So the author sees that in times of mediation, if there is someone who is taking an extreme position and attaining a support through the masses, that side would eventually have support. So what is the most amicable way for solving any problems of mediation in the future? That is focusing on dialogue. In our economic survey itself, whenever we are talking about governance, in the last year economic survey, there was this theory of nudge. So in order to take this theory and apply it here, we have to understand that respect and mutual understanding will create long lasting solutions. In the absence of such a mediation, ultimately the political forces would take over and benefit from them. That is the point of contention of this article. The second article for the day is taken from the Live Mint, and it is titled self-reliance in defense is a national imperative. The context of this article is the ongoing tension between India and China. So, we have had a situation where China has been preparing for war with India, and it has been upscaling its operations as well as engagement with India on our borders. So, in this backdrop and our call for Atmanirbhar Bharat, this initiative to come up with a policy of defense production and export promotion, which focuses upon the objective of achieving a turnover of 1,75,000 crores through exports of aerospace and defense goods by 2025. So, is this the first time that we are coming up with such a policy? No. A similar draft policy was also released in 2018 itself. So, if you take a look at our defense industry, most of it is by government itself and there is no private participation. So, almost 80% of the weapons that are created to supply for the army are coming from government. So, there is no competition and there is no encouragement for defense industry as such. So, the new policy encourages private participation in defense production, and that too indigenously, so that we can raise our volume of production to such an extent that we become exporters and generate revenue by 2025. Now, this is a very important claim because in the context of our national weapons, we are still heavily reliant upon imports. As a matter of fact, India is the third largest arms importer. So, there is no getting away from the fact that India desperately needs to improve its position with respect to its treatment of private sector. In order to jumpstart the defense production in a major way, private sector should be heavily encouraged and it should be given all the kinds of facilities needed to compete with the government sector. If you take the look at the government sector which is involved in arms research and production, we have majorly DRDO. There are around 50 labs of DRDO itself. There are 4 defense shipyards, 5 defense PSUs and nearly 41 ordnance factories which produces small kinds of weapons. So, also concurrently there is something that needs to be done drastically. We have to improve on delivering cutting edge weapon systems without huge time and cost overruns. How do we do that? So, the policy document clearly lays down what are the strategic steps needed. To begin with, it uses the existing framework that is already available in the country through DRDO. So, DRDO, for instance, as cited in the policy document, will be setting up missions in certain fields. It will consult the armed forces and will take the lead in developing this cutting edge technology in weapon systems. So, what are the different kinds of weapons that we are trying to create? They include hypersonic, ballistic and cruise missiles. So, the weapons also include vehicles which are armored, and then we have also gas turbine engines which are being produced. We also have submarines, we have 5th generation jets, transport aircrafts, robotics and airborne sensors. So, all this will be spearheaded by DRDO. Other strategies include focusing on areas which include procurement reforms, indigenization and support to MSME. Other strategies include gathering finances through investment promotion. So, in order to make industry a profitable one, there should be an end to the monopoly of defense. Next one is increasing the FDI in defense sector. The next one would be increasing the ease of doing business with respect to defense. And lastly, we are talking about R&D. Unless and until we have innovation, there is very little possibility for generating revenue. So, this innovation should be led by the defense PSUs, and eventually private should be made partners. So, this is a national imperative for India because we cannot depend upon other countries for our own security. Eventually, it will not only help our defense system but also generate many jobs in our economy. That is the summary of this article and the various points covered.